Welcome to Thrive at Work, a podcast which offers insights and latest employment trends to help employers attract, retain and develop great people with me, Polly Rathbone Ward. With special guests, we're going to be discussing the many and varied aspects of HR, from practical topics to overarching cultural themes. We'll be looking beyond traditional styles of management to bring new and people-centred ideas to forward-thinking organisations that want to shape a new future where people can thrive at work. Hello, it's Polly here. Welcome to Thrive at Work. Today I want to reflect on the year and also talk about what I have planned for this podcast as we move into 2022. I launched the podcast in October and I've had some fantastic guests talking about some fascinating topics. For the last podcast of 2021, I thought I'd take the opportunity to do a solo podcast around my thoughts around 2021, a bit about me and my background too, the purpose of the podcast, and a few insights around leadership and employment. Not everyone is a natural people leader. If you are a business leader, CEO or people manager, you are no doubt an expert in your field, but you may not be an expert in managing people. If you're a founder of a business and you have started to bring people into the business because you're growing, you will be used to doing absolutely everything yourself and letting go and delegating maybe new skills you are having to learn. Something I've seen many times is that people who are very good at their role will get promoted, often to a supervisor or manager position, where they will have responsibility for managing people. But they often do not get the training and support that they need in relation to managing people, which actually takes a whole new set of skills. So, a little bit about me. My name is Polly Rathbone Ward. I've worked in HR for 20 years in large and small organisations in a variety of industries. I'm a fellow of the CIPD. I co-run the Bath HR network and I mentor students completing their Masters in Human Resource Management. I also frequently speak at industry and business events about leadership and culture. In 2018, I set up my own HR consultancy business, working with small to medium-sized businesses to set up their HR functions and ensure that they recruit, develop and retain great people. I've also always had a strong interest in health and well-being. Years ago, I took fitness qualifications and throughout my 20s, I had a bit of a side hustle as a fitness instructor. I retain a real interest in health and well-being in the workplace and the relationship between healthy and happy employees and overall organisational performance. I believe strongly that through creating the right sort of working environment where people are happy and healthy and productive at work, there will be many positive outcomes for the organisation as well. It's been fascinating to see changes to the people profession over the last 20 years, particularly since the start of the pandemic, where organisations went through profound and immediate upheaval, and we have seen dynamic change happening to the way that we work. There was the furlough scheme set up by the UK government in March 2020 in response to the pandemic to protect the jobs of those whose workplaces had to temporarily close due to the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. And a large number of organisations had to transfer to remote working almost overnight, again due to the restrictions. Some people had to manage childcare and homeschooling as well as work, and there's been a huge amount of change that has happened very quickly. And with this change, there has been a huge amount of challenge for individuals and organisations alike. It's quite clear that individuals and organisations have had very different experiences during the pandemic depending on their circumstances. And it's become clear that a one-size-fits-all approach to leadership is really not appropriate in the workplace. And ideally, organisations should take account of individual circumstances and be a bit more flexible as the dust has started to settle. But now we are starting to see the implications of the Omicron variant. In this podcast, I intend to cover almost like a blueprint for a people-focused culture that you might want to consider developing within your workplace. I'll be covering core HR fundamentals of your people strategy as well, all the way along the journey that your employees experience, from hiring and attracting people to onboarding, well-being, developing people, career pathways, leadership, communication style, personal and professional development, and lots of other areas, taking into account the latest news, insights, and trends. I've already covered some amazing topics, such as how to support women going through menopause at work, how to create an inclusive workplace, the importance of employer branding, and supporting employees through change and uncertain times. And I've got so many more exciting topics to come. The guests who join me are inspiring and experts in their fields and in the topics I'll be covering. I do see a huge opportunity for organisations to make change and do things differently. The pandemic has been challenging for all of us, and we have a real opportunity now to move away from traditional ways of working and styles of management towards a more flexible model, taking into account changing circumstances and individual requirements. And of course, we have automation and technology that is available and will help us as well. I actually do believe that if we do not take the opportunity to move to a more people-focused approach to leadership, it will be harder for organisations to retain their top people. For example, people have got used to an element of flexibility around how and when they work. They may also be looking for an organisation with a strong sense of purpose and a sense of community and belonging, and organisations that demonstrate sustainable, responsible and ethical business practices. There is significant evidence to show that the majority of workers will want to continue working from home at least some of the time. If organisations do not provide this, I feel people will leave in search of more flexible and modern leadership. Interestingly, only 5% of the adult working population worked remotely full-time prior to the pandemic. The pandemic clearly significantly increased this. COVID also heightened the need for a focus on employee well-being in the workplace. This was a rising trend prior to the pandemic, but I think there's never been a more important time to review what you are doing for employee well-being. The Health and Safety Executive website states that 1 in 4 people will experience poor mental health in their lives. However, I think the pandemic has accelerated the need for mental health support, with 56% of people having experienced poor mental health since the start of the pandemic. We know that mentally and physically fit people are 3 times more productive, so individuals and organisations are suffering as a result of poor well-being. Deloitte released a report in June 2020 which actually quantifies the return on investment for well-being. For every £1 invested in employee well-being, there is a return of £5.20, which is more than a 5 times return. Another significant priority we've seen in 2021 is the need to encourage diversity and inclusive workplaces. A truly inclusive workplace will welcome and support people from all backgrounds, regardless of any personal or protected characteristic. Aside from being the ethical, moral and legal thing to do, there are many benefits to having a diverse workplace. If you bring people together and enable them to be themselves at work, you are more likely to encourage more creativity and innovation and improve your recruitment and retention, and also you're more likely to outperform organisations that are not encouraging diversity. These are just some of the priorities that we've seen in 2021. At the end of 2021, we can reflect back on this year. We have seen vacancy numbers soaring to a record high of 1.1 million between July and September, according to the Office for National Statistics. As someone who works with a number of organisations, I've heard the terms the Great Resignation, flight risk and retention bonus used with increasing frequency as organisations grapple with real and continuing consequences of the pandemic and struggle to attract and retain great people within this competitive market. For employers, there are huge benefits when employee needs are met. beyond simply providing a salary. But how do you bring this into your organisation and create this sort of culture? That's what we are covering on this podcast. Lots of topics around how you can shape a modern and people-centred future. If this podcast is helpful to listeners in some way, then I will have achieved what I intended. If you'd like to reach out at all and have a chat about anything related to HR, please do contact me through my social channels, Rathbone HR, through my website, which is www.rathboneHRsolutions.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm so excited about the podcast episodes I've got planned for 2022. They're going to be released every 2 weeks, and I'm looking forward to digging deeper into those key HR topics with guests. So feel free to get in touch and let's look forward, look beyond traditional styles of management to shape a more modern, people-focused future where people can thrive at work.